Hello, Central Oregon. Eric Pasha here with Home Source of Neighbor Impact. Today I am here with Aaron Lebenek from Oregon Legal Aide to join me for another edition of our Financial Survival Guide series, helping you stay informed so that you can protect yourself in a fast-changing financial environment. Erin is a housing attorney at Legal Aide Services of Oregon. She's been doing this work for over 5 years, including her last 3 years in Bend. Erin, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start here. What is the rental eviction moratorium and who does it apply to?
Yeah, so a moratorium is basically a legally authorized way to delay obligations that people may have. So in Oregon, tenants have an obligation to pay their rent, and landlords can terminate a rental agreement or start a court eviction case if rent is not paid. Because of the pandemic, Oregon's governor, the federal legislature, and the Oregon's chief justice have all taken action to protect tenants during this time and to delay termination notices and evictions because of non-payment of rent. So there's a few different eviction moratoriums at play right now. As of today, June 11th, 2020, in Oregon, Governor's Executive Order 20-13 that prohibits terminations of residential tenancies for non-payment of rent. It also prohibits terminations under the no-cause termination statute in Oregon, and that prohibition lasts until June 30th of 2020. This means that a landlord cannot serve or give a non-payment of rent notice or a no-cause termination notice until after the moratorium ends on June 30th, 2020. Under the executive order, landlords are also prohibited from charging late fees of any kind during the duration of the moratorium. So that started April 1st and goes through June 30th. This applies to all residential tenancies in Oregon. So in addition, there is a federal eviction moratorium that comes through the CARES Act, which was federal legislation. This covers tenancies in only certain dwelling units, those that are touched by federal dollars. So according to the Act, all dwelling units that are covered by the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, USDA rural housing, or any dwelling unit that has a federally backed mortgage is affected by this moratorium. So now, to put that in practical terms, the Act covers everything from housing choice vouchers, Section 8, or low-income housing tax credit properties, or what most people think of as affordable housing properties that limit the amount of income that somebody can have to live there. It also applies to houses or apartment complexes that have an FHA or a Freddie or Fannie mortgage. That's potentially a huge number of tenancies in Central Oregon. It can be anything from apartment complexes to single family homes, even mobile home parks. So the confusing part is tenants might not necessarily know what type of loan or mortgage their landlord has. So to help with that, there are some databases that are being compiled that are searchable on the internet. So for example, National Low Income Housing Coalition has a searchable database on their website. Tenants can also ask their landlord what kind of mortgage they have, speak to an attorney, call their local legal aid office, or use other sources of public information to try and get to the bottom of that. So if the CARES Act applies to a tenancy, what does that mean? It means a landlord cannot file an eviction case until after July 25th of 2020. So it's a little bit longer than the Oregon moratorium. Under the CARES Act, a landlord is also prohibited from charging any late fees. Some local governments around Oregon have some additional protections, such as Multnomah County, Beaverton, Tualatin. However, there are no additional protections enacted in Central Oregon.
Excellent. A lot of good information there. So it sounds like there are some overlapping protections, and it's not just the rental eviction moratorium, but also kind of a moratorium, for lack of a better word, or late fees not being allowed to be charged during that time.
Correct.
Excellent. So to further that conversation, what is the status of court eviction cases?
Yeah, so court eviction cases are paused as well. It's through a separate mechanism through the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court has issued an order saying that courts shouldn't be scheduling the first appearances in court eviction cases before July 1st of 2020.
I see. So some additional kind of timelines being laid out when it comes to those court eviction cases. So does this mean good news for renter? Does this mean that tenants can stop paying their rent?
So the moratorium just means that a landlord cannot serve a termination notice for non-payment of rent. The rent is still owed and is still accruing, but it means that the landlord can't take that next step until the moratorium ends. So if a tenant is unable to pay their rent, they should definitely be in communication upfront with their landlord, let their landlord know what's going on, and pay as soon as they are able to.
So there's still a bill due and there's a timeline for that. We've just kind of paused some of the negative legal ramifications of that.
Correct.
Perfect. So what happens after the rental moratorium ends? What information can you give renters about how to prepare for that time?
Right. So as soon as the eviction moratorium ends, a landlord can serve or give their tenant a termination notice for non-payment of rent. So standard in Oregon, that's usually a 72-hour notice to pay the rent or move out of the unit. And so as it stands right now, June 11th, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. That is typically 72 hours or 3 days to pay all the rent that's owing, being sure that a landlord's not charging or requiring payment of late fees. In addition, just the rent that's been accrued. However, as I talked about before, if the CARES Act applies to the tenancy, the landlord needs to be giving the tenant at least 30 days to pay the rent.
I see. Okay. So currently with the Oregon bill, there's no grace period for that, but if they're additionally covered with the CARES Act, there would be, for lack of a better term, 30-day grace period to repay.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Thank you. So what can a tenant do if they receive an eviction notice from their landlord?
So as I've been talking about, this is pretty confusing stuff and it's changing all the time. And so it's really important if a tenant receives any sort of termination notice during this time period that they're consulting with an attorney. So one way that folks in Central Oregon can do that is to contact their local legal aid office. That's our office. It's located here in Bend, serving Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties. Tenants can also go to OregonLawHelp.org, which is our legal aid statewide website, to find their local legal aid office if they're outside the Tri-County area.
Excellent. Some good information. Now, is there anything else that you think that Central Oregonians should know during this time?
So our office is always available to call and contact us. During this time, we know that a lot of folks are feeling the crunch of finances and jobs not coming through, funds not coming through. So to really be in contact with community organizations and resources who might be able to help with rental assistance. During this time, there has been a huge expansion of who might potentially qualify for unemployment insurance. So there's special pandemic unemployment insurance that covers people like gig workers or independent contractors that typically wouldn't be able to get that assistance. So to really be reaching out to community resources to figure out whether or not there's rental assistance or other ways to get funds for your family to keep your housing during this time.
Excellent. Some great considerations there. Well, Erin, thank you for your time today and for all that you're doing for renters here in Central Oregon.
Thanks so much.
You bet. This has been another edition of our Financial Survival Guide. I'm Eric Pasha with Home Source of Neighbor Impact. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourself.